Hey everyone, it's me again. 3 years ago, I was sleeping on my friend's couch in a cramped studio apartment in downtown LA, editing videos on a laptop that crashed every 20 minutes. I had 17 subscribers, and I'm pretty sure 12 of them were my family members who felt sorry for me. Fast forward to today, and I've got 8 million subscribers, a penthouse overlooking the Hollywood Hills, and brand deals that pay more in a month than my dad made in a year. But here's something I never thought I'd say on camera. I've never felt more empty in my entire life. I know that sounds crazy, right? Living the dream that millions of people would kill for. And I'm sitting here telling you it feels like a nightmare. But stick with me, because what happened at VidCon last month changed everything I thought I knew about success, about connection, and about who I really am underneath all this. It started about 6 months ago. I was in my walk-in closet, which is bigger than that first apartment I mentioned, trying to decide which designer hoodie would get the best engagement for my morning story. And I caught myself in the mirror. For a split second, I didn't recognize the person staring back at me. This polished, calculated version of myself that I'd created felt like wearing someone else's skin. The comments on my videos had shifted too. Instead of people sharing their own stories or asking genuine questions, it was all demands. Do a collab with this person. Review this product. React to this trend. I'd become a content machine, not a human being. My audience didn't want to connect with Tyler anymore. They wanted to consume whatever version of me would entertain them for the next 8 minutes. The loneliness hit me hardest at night. I'd scroll through my analytics, watching those beautiful green numbers climb higher and higher, but my chest felt hollow. I had millions of people watching my every move, analyzing my facial expressions, dissecting my words, but I couldn't remember the last time someone had asked me how I was really doing. Not Tyler the brand, but Tyler the person who still got nervous before phone calls and cried during sad movies. My team started treating me differently too. Sarah, my manager, would schedule my entire day down to 15-minute increments. Tyler has a brand meeting at 10, content creation from noon to 4, then a strategy session. I wasn't a person anymore. I was a product with a very busy calendar. The breaking point came during a collaboration video with another creator. We were supposed to be having this fun, spontaneous conversation, but every word felt scripted. Every laugh felt forced. I watched the footage later, and I looked like an actor playing a character named Tyler. The real me had disappeared somewhere between the ring lights and the subscriber milestones. That's when I decided to go to VidCon. I thought maybe being around my community, seeing the faces behind the usernames, would remind me why I started this journey. I thought it would bring back that spark, that genuine excitement I used to feel when I hit record. I was so wrong. But sometimes being wrong leads you exactly where you need to be. The night before VidCon, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my first video, the one that started everything. I was just talking to my camera about feeling lost after dropping out of college, sharing my fears about disappointing my parents, wondering if anyone else felt like they were pretending to have their life together. It was raw, unfiltered, and completely terrifying to post. But people connected with it. They shared their own stories of feeling lost, of struggling with expectations, of trying to figure out who they were supposed to be. That video got 43 views, but every single comment felt like a conversation with a friend. Now my videos get millions of views, but the comments feel like noise. When did I stop being a person and become a brand? When did my audience stop being friends and become consumers? And more importantly, how do I find my way back to who I used to be? I had no idea that the answer would come from a Backstage volunteer who didn't even know my name. VidCon 2024 in Anaheim was supposed to be my redemption arc. I'd been planning this appearance for 3 months, coordinating with my team, preparing exclusive content reveals, and honestly, for the first time in months, I felt genuinely excited about connecting with people who'd been part of my journey. I remember walking into the Anaheim Convention Center that morning, wearing my signature black hoodie from my merch line. You know, the one that sold out in 3 hours and crashed my website? Sarah was practically bouncing beside me, rattling off schedules and photo opportunities. The energy in the building was electric, thousands of creators and fans buzzing with anticipation. But the moment we reached my booth, something felt off, like when you walk into a room and sense everyone was just talking about you. The crowd that had gathered wasn't giving me the usual energy I was used to. Sure, people were taking photos, but from a distance. When I tried to approach groups wearing my merch, they'd give these awkward smiles and drift away. It was like watching people interact with a zoo animal instead of a human being. I kept telling myself it was just first day jitters, that things would warm up. But as the hours passed, the invisible wall between me and my community, only seemed to get thicker. These were supposed to be my people, the ones who'd supported me through panic attacks and family drama, who'd celebrated every milestone with me. Now they felt like strangers studying a museum exhibit. The breaking point came around 2 in the afternoon. I was signing some posters when I overheard 2 teenagers talking just a few feet away. One was wearing my Stay Authentic t-shirt, which made what happened next feel like a knife to the chest. "I used to watch him religiously," she said to her friend, not bothering to lower her voice. "But now he just feels like every other sellout influencer. Like, when's the last time he made content that wasn't sponsored or calculated for maximum engagement?" Her friend nodded. "Remember when he used to just talk to us? Like we were actually friends? Now it's all brand deals and perfect lighting? I miss the old Tyler. The old Tyler. They were talking about me like I was dead." I finished signing that poster with hands that had started shaking, trying to keep my smile intact while my world crumbled around me. These weren't random haters or trolls. These were fans wearing my merchandise. People who'd been part of Tyler's tribe since I had barely 10,000 subscribers. And they were mourning the person I used to be. The worst part, they were right. I couldn't even remember the last time I'd made a video just because I wanted to share something. Not because it fit into my content calendar, or aligned with a brand partnership. Every spontaneous moment had become calculated for maximum viral potential. I excused myself from the booth, telling Sarah I needed a bathroom break, but really I just needed to escape before I completely fell apart in front of everyone. The convention center's backstage area became my refuge, a maze of concrete corridors and equipment cases where I could finally drop the performance. Walking through those empty hallways, I felt like I was having an out-of-body experience. I could see myself from the outside, this polished, branded version of Tyler that I'd created, and I didn't recognize who I'd become. The hoodie that used to represent my authentic self now felt like a costume I was trapped inside. I found this dimly lit corridor behind the main stage and just collapsed onto an equipment case. For the first time in months, nobody was watching me. Nobody was recording. Nobody needed me to be on. I pulled off that damn hoodie because wearing it felt like suffocating in my own success. Sitting there in that concrete hallway, surrounded by cables and sound equipment, I finally let myself feel the weight of what I'd lost. Not just the connection with my audience, but the connection with myself. I'd optimized the humanity right out of my own life. That's when I heard footsteps echoing down the hallway, and everything changed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because what happened next would challenge everything I thought I knew about influence, about success, and about what it really means to connect with another human being. Sitting there in that backstage hallway, I had what I can only describe as the most terrifying moment of clarity in my life. It was like someone had ripped away a curtain I didn't even know was there, and suddenly I could see everything with brutal honesty. I wasn't just having a bad day at VidCon. This was the inevitable result of choices I'd been making for months without even realizing it. Every time I chose engagement over authenticity, every time I said yes to a brand deal that didn't feel right, every time I crafted a caption designed to manipulate emotions rather than share genuine thoughts, I'd been slowly erasing the person my audience had originally fallen in love with. The Tyler who started this channel 3 years ago would have been horrified by what I'd become. That guy used to film videos in his car because his roommate was always home, talking about his fears and dreams like he was confiding in his best friend. He made mistakes, stumbled over words, and sometimes cried on camera when life got overwhelming. People connected with him because he was real, flawed, and unafraid to be vulnerable. But somewhere along the way, I decided that version of myself wasn't good enough. Not polished enough, not marketable enough, not successful enough. So I'd slowly replaced him with this carefully curated persona that looked like me, but felt like wearing a mask that had fused to my skin. The numbers had become my drug. Every notification, every milestone, every brand wanting to work with me felt like validation that I was finally worthy of love and attention. But the higher those numbers climbed, the more disconnected I felt from the actual humans behind them. My audience had become statistics, not people. Views, not relationships. Revenue streams, not friendships. I thought about Tyler's tribe, the Discord community that had formed around my channel. 50,000 members who used to share their struggles, celebrate each other's wins, and create this beautiful support system. I used to spend hours in there, just talking with people, learning their names, remembering their stories. When had I stopped showing up for them? When had I started seeing them as just another metric to manage? The realization hit me like a physical blow. I'd become everything I used to criticize about other creators. The sellouts, the fake personalities, the people who treated their audiences like ATMs instead of human beings. I was the villain in someone else's story about authentic creators who'd lost their way. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah asking where I was, and I stared at the screen like it was written in a foreign language. The schedule she'd sent showed 3 more hours of appearances, meet and greets, and photo opportunities. 3 more hours of pretending to be someone I wasn't, for people who could see right through the performance. I started thinking about my content from the past year, and it made me physically sick. Every video had been focus grouped to death. My team would analyze trending topics, competitor strategies, and optimal posting times before I even knew what I wanted to talk about. The spontaneous moments that used to make my content special had been replaced by calculated authenticity, which is the most oxymoronic phrase I've ever heard. Even my personal life had become content. My relationship, my mental health struggles, my family dynamics, everything had been filtered through the lens of, how will this play with my audience? I'd stopped living my life and started performing it instead. The loneliness wasn't just about being disconnected from my fans. I was disconnected from myself. I couldn't remember the last time I'd had a genuine emotion that wasn't immediately analyzed for its content potential. I couldn't remember the last time I'd done something just because it brought me joy, not because it would look good on my story. That's when the tears started. Not the pretty, single tear down the cheek kind you see in movies, but the ugly, shoulder-shaking sobs of someone who just realized they'd been living someone else's life. I was mourning the death of my authentic self, and the worst part was that I'd been the one who'd killed him. I thought about calling my mom, but what would I say? That the success she was so proud of felt like a prison? That the dream life I'd built was actually a nightmare? That her son had disappeared somewhere between the first 1,000,000 subscribers and the brand partnerships? The concrete wall was cold against my back, and I found myself wondering if this was what rock bottom felt like when you're supposedly living the dream. I had everything I thought I wanted, but I'd lost everything that actually mattered. That's when I heard those footsteps echoing down the hallway, getting closer. Part of me hoped it was just another volunteer who wouldn't recognize me, someone I could just be human around for a few minutes. But another part of me was terrified that it would be a fan, and I'd have to put the mask back on before I'd even figured out how to take it off. What happened next would change everything, but not in the way I expected. The footsteps belonged to a guy in a VidCon volunteer t-shirt, carrying a bundle of cables that looked like they weighed more than my entire setup at home. He was probably in his mid-30s, with the kind of genuine smile that you don't see much in my industry. When he spotted me sitting there, hoodie crumpled in my lap, tear stains probably obvious even in the dim lighting, he did something that completely caught me off guard. He didn't ask for a selfie. He didn't pull out his phone. He didn't even seem to recognize me at first. He just looked at me with the kind of concern you'd show a stranger having a rough day and said, "Hey man, you okay?" Those 3 words hit me harder than any hate comment ever had. When was the last time someone had asked me that question and actually wanted to hear the real answer? Not, "How's the channel doing?" or "What's your next big project?" Just a simple, human check-in on how I was actually feeling. "Not really," I heard myself say, and my voice cracked like I was 13 again. "I'm having what you might call an existential crisis in a convention center hallway." He set down his cables and leaned against the wall across from me. "Those are the worst kind," he said with a laugh that wasn't mocking, just understanding. "I'm Marcus, by the way, and you look like someone who needs to remember why they started doing whatever it is they do." I told him my name, expecting the usual reaction, but Marcus just nodded like I'd said I was Steve from accounting. It was the most refreshing non-reaction I'd experienced in years. "So what do you do, Tyler?" he asked, and I realized I didn't know how to answer that question anymore. I used to say I was a storyteller, someone who shared experiences to help people feel less alone. Now I wasn't sure what I was, besides a walking brand. "I make videos," I said finally. Or at least I used to. Now I think I just perform for cameras. Marcus sat down on another equipment case, making himself comfortable like we were old friends catching up. "What changed?" he asked. And something about his tone made me want to actually answer honestly. So I told him everything. About the pressure to constantly create. About losing touch with my audience. About feeling like I'd become a product instead of a person. I told him about the teenagers at my booth. About the merchandise that felt like wearing a costume. About the crushing loneliness of being watched by millions but truly seen by no one. Marcus listened without interrupting, without offering quick fixes or empty reassurances. He just let me talk. And for the first time in months, I felt heard. "You know what's funny?" he said when I finally ran out of words. "I'm a teacher. Been doing it for 12 years now. And every few years I go through the same thing you're describing. I start focusing so much on test scores and evaluations that I forget why I became a teacher in the first place. He pulled out his phone, but instead of asking for a photo, he showed me a video. It was shaky, clearly shot by a kid, showing his students working on some kind of science project. They were laughing, making mistakes, getting excited about their discoveries. It was completely unpolished and absolutely beautiful. "This is what reminds me," Marcus said. "Not because it's perfect, but because it's real. These kids aren't performing for anyone. They're just being themselves and sharing something they care about." Watching those kids, I saw everything I'd lost. They weren't worried about engagement rates or brand alignment. They were just excited about learning and wanted to share that excitement with others. It was pure, unfiltered passion, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt anything close to that about my own content. "When's the last time you made something just because you wanted to?" Marcus asked, and I couldn't answer. Every piece of content I'd created in the past year had been strategically planned, focus grouped, and optimized for maximum reach. Before I continue with what Marcus taught me next, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt disconnected from something you once loved? Maybe a hobby that became work, or a passion that got buried under expectations? Drop a comment below and share your story. I read every single one, and knowing I'm not alone in this struggle means everything to me. And if this story is hitting home for you, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your support reminds me why authentic connection matters more than any algorithm. Don't forget to share this with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to feel lost sometimes. Marcus had to get back to work, but before he left, he said something that would change my entire perspective on what influence really means. Marcus gathered up his cables, but he didn't seem in any rush to leave. Instead, he looked at me with this expression I couldn't quite read, like he was deciding whether to say something that might be too personal for a stranger. "Can I tell you something that might sound weird?" he asked, and I nodded, desperate for any wisdom that might help me make sense of the mess I'd created. I've been teaching for 12 years, and I've watched hundreds of kids grow up. The ones who stick with me, who still send me updates years later. They're never the ones who got perfect grades or followed every rule. They're the ones who weren't afraid to be messy, to ask questions that didn't have easy answers, to share their real struggles instead of pretending everything was fine. He paused, studying my face. "Your fans didn't fall in love with your success, Tyler. They fell in love with your story. The real one, with all the messy parts and uncertainty. Maybe it's time to remember what that story was actually about." Those words hit me like a lightning bolt. I thought about my earliest videos, the ones that had built my entire foundation. I wasn't successful then. I was broke, scared, and completely lost. But I was honest about it. I shared my failures, my doubts, my moments of panic when I thought I'd made the biggest mistake of my life by dropping out of college. People didn't subscribe because I had answers. They subscribed because I was asking the same questions they were, and I wasn't afraid to admit I didn't know what I was doing. We were figuring it out together, and that shared vulnerability created something beautiful. "I used to film videos in my car," I told Marcus, the memory hitting me with unexpected force. "My roommate was always home, and I was too embarrassed to ask him to leave. So I'd sit in this beat-up Honda Civic in parking lots, talking about how terrified I was of disappointing my parents, how I felt like everyone else had their life figured out except me." Marcus smiled. "And people connected with that?" "More than anything I've made since," I admitted. "Those videos got maybe a few hundred views each, but every comment felt like a conversation with a friend. People would share their own stories, their own fears. We built this community of people who were all just trying to figure out how to be adults." The contrast with my current content was devastating. Now I made videos in a professionally lit studio, with scripts and multiple takes and editing that removed every imperfection. I talked about success strategies and productivity hacks and maintaining a positive mindset, as if I'd somehow transcended the human experience of doubt and struggle. "What happened to that guy?" Marcus asked gently. I thought about it. Really thought about it. I guess I decided he wasn't good enough. The industry kept telling me I needed to level up, to be more professional, to create content that would scale. So I started copying what successful creators were doing, instead of staying true to what made me unique in the first place. The irony was crushing. In trying to become more successful, I'd destroyed the very thing that made me worth following. I'd traded authenticity for optimization, connection for metrics, and my soul for subscriber counts. Marcus checked his watch. "I really do need to get these cables to the main stage. But before I go, let me ask you something. If you could make one video right now, with no pressure about views or engagement or brand partnerships, what would it be about? The answer came immediately, like it had been waiting for someone to ask. I'd talk about how lonely success can be, how you can have everything you thought you wanted and still feel empty inside, how the pressure to be perfect all the time is slowly killing the thing you used to love most. So why don't you? Such a simple question, but it revealed the cage I'd built around myself. Why didn't I? Because my team would say it wasn't on brand. Because sponsors might not like the negative messaging. Because admitting struggle might make me seem weak or ungrateful. But as I sat there in that concrete hallway, I realized those fears were exactly what was wrong with everything I'd built. I'd become so afraid of showing weakness that I'd forgotten strength comes from vulnerability, not from pretending you have it all figured out. You know what the best part of teaching is? Marcus said, shouldering his cables. It's not when I have all the answers. It's when I can admit I don't know something, and we figure it out together. That's when real learning happens. He started walking away, then turned back. Your audience doesn't need you to be perfect, Tyler. They need you to be real. The guy who made those videos in his car, he understood that. Maybe it's time to find him again. As his footsteps faded down the hallway, I sat there processing what had just happened. A complete stranger had seen through all my success and status to the scared, lost person underneath. And instead of judging me for it, he'd reminded me that being scared and lost was exactly what had made me relatable in the first place. I pulled out my phone and looked at my reflection in the black screen. For the first time in months, I didn't see Tyler the brand. I saw Tyler the person. The one who was still figuring things out, still making mistakes, still learning how to be human. And I realized that person was exactly who my audience had been missing. I sat in that hallway for another 10 minutes after Marcus left, staring at my phone and feeling something I hadn't experienced in months, the urge to create something real. Not because it was scheduled or strategic, but because I had something genuine to say. My hands were shaking as I walked back toward my booth. Sarah spotted me immediately, relief flooding her face as she rushed over with her clipboard, and that familiar look of controlled panic. Tyler, thank God. We have the meet and greet in 15 minutes, then the panel discussion, and the brand activation is expecting you at 4:30, she rattled off. But her words felt like they were coming from underwater. I looked past her at my booth setup. The perfectly arranged merchandise display, the professional backdrop with my logo, the scheduled photo opportunities. It all felt like a museum exhibit dedicated to someone I used to be. Sarah, I said, interrupting her mid-sentence about Instagram story content. I need to do something different. She paused, stylus hovering over her tablet. Different how? We can't change the schedule now, Tyler. There are contracts, expectations. But I was already walking toward the small stage area adjacent to my booth, where a microphone stood ready for the planned Q&A session. A crowd had gathered, maybe 200 people, most of them keeping that same uncomfortable distance I'd noticed all day. I grabbed the microphone before I could lose my nerve. Hey everyone, I said, and my voice cracked slightly. The crowd looked up, surprised by the unscheduled interruption. I know this isn't what you were expecting, but I need to tell you something. Sarah was making frantic hand gestures from the side, but I couldn't stop now. The words were pouring out of me like water through a broken dam. I've been lying to you. Not intentionally, but I've been showing you this polished, perfect version of myself that doesn't actually exist. And I think that's why today has felt so weird between us. The crowd moved closer. I could see phones coming up, but not for selfies. People were recording because something real was happening, and they could feel it. The truth is, I'm struggling. I have been for months. I feel disconnected from my content, from you guys, from myself. I've been so focused on growing the brand and hitting metrics that I forgot why I started making videos in the first place. A girl in the front row, maybe 16, had tears in her eyes. She was wearing one of my hoodies, and seeing her emotional response to my honesty broke something open in my chest. I used to make videos because I felt alone, and I thought maybe sharing that loneliness would help other people feel less alone too. But somewhere along the way, I started making videos to maintain an image, to keep up with algorithms, to satisfy sponsors, and I lost the person you originally followed. The silence was deafening, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like the moment right before dawn, when everything is still and full of possibility. I met someone today who reminded me that you didn't fall in love with my success. You fell in love with my story. The messy, uncertain, very human story of someone trying to figure out life. And I want to get back to telling that story, if you'll let me. That's when the girl in the front row spoke up. We've been waiting for you to come back, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The real you. We missed you. Her words hit me like a physical force. They hadn't abandoned me. They'd been waiting for me to stop abandoning myself. What happened next surprised everyone, including me. Instead of the usual meet and greet format, people started sharing their own stories. The girl who'd called me a sellout earlier came back, apologizing and explaining she was dealing with her own authenticity struggles in high school. A dad in his 40s told me how my early videos about anxiety had helped him understand what his teenage son was going through. A college student shared how my content about dropping out had given her courage to switch majors when she realized she was studying something she hated just to please her parents. These weren't just fans anymore. They were real people with real struggles, and my willingness to be vulnerable had created space for them to be vulnerable too. The invisible wall that had separated us all day was crumbling, and in its place was something I'd forgotten existed: genuine human connection. We talked for 3 hours past my scheduled time. Sarah was having a complete meltdown about the disrupted schedule, but something magical was happening that couldn't be planned, or optimized, or put in a content calendar. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Not Tyler the brand, but Tyler the person who still got nervous and made mistakes and didn't have all the answers. And incredibly, beautifully, that was exactly who my audience wanted me to be. The energy in that space was unlike anything I'd experienced in my entire career. What started as a scheduled meet and greet had transformed into something that felt more like group therapy. And I mean that in the most beautiful way possible. A woman in her 30s approached the microphone we'd set up for questions. Her hands were shaking, and I could see her gathering courage before she spoke. "I've been following you since you had maybe 5,000 subscribers," she said, her voice trembling. "I was going through a divorce. Felt like my whole life was falling apart. Your videos about feeling lost, about not knowing what comes next, they literally kept me going some nights." She paused, wiping her eyes. "But this past year, watching your content, I started feeling like I wasn't successful enough to relate to you anymore. Like you'd outgrown people like me. Today, hearing you talk about struggling, about feeling disconnected, it reminds me that we're all just figuring it out as we go." I had to take a moment before responding because her words hit me so hard. This woman had been with me since almost the beginning, and I'd made her feel left behind. How many others had I lost along the way by trying to project an image of having it all together? "Thank you for saying that," I managed. "And I'm sorry. I'm sorry I made you feel like your struggles weren't valid anymore, like you had to reach some level of success to deserve connection. That's exactly the opposite of what I ever wanted this community to be about." A teenager raised his hand next. "I'm 17, and I've been dealing with anxiety and depression. Your old videos helped me realize I wasn't broken, just human. But lately I stopped watching because everything felt so polished and perfect. It made me feel worse about my own mess." His honesty was like a punch to the gut. I thought about all the content I'd created in the past year, all the motivational messaging and success strategies. I'd been trying to inspire people, but instead, I'd been making them feel inadequate. "Can I tell you something?" I said to him, and to everyone listening. "I still have anxiety attacks. Just last week, I had one so bad I couldn't leave my apartment for 2 days. But I didn't talk about it because I thought it would hurt my brand. How messed up is that? I was hiding the very experiences that connected us in the first place." The crowd was completely silent, hanging on every word. This wasn't the polished, scripted Tyler they'd been seeing for months. This was raw, unfiltered truth, and they were drinking it up like people dying of thirst. An older man stepped forward. "I'm not your typical demographic," he said with a slight smile. "I'm 52, and I started watching your videos because my daughter showed them to me. She said you reminded her of me when I was younger, struggling to figure out my career." He looked directly at me. "What I loved about your content was that you weren't afraid to admit when you were scared or confused. It helped me remember that those feelings don't go away just because you get older. We're all still that confused kid inside, just with more responsibilities." His words made me think about my own dad, who'd called me last month worried because I seemed different in my videos. "You don't seem like yourself anymore," he'd said. And I'd brushed it off as him not understanding the business side of content creation. But he'd seen what everyone else had seen. I'd lost myself somewhere in the pursuit of success. A young woman approached next, and I recognized her immediately. She was the one who'd been wearing my "Stay Authentic" shirt earlier. The one whose comment about me being a sellout had started this whole crisis. "I owe you an apology," she said, and I could see she'd been crying. "What I said earlier, about you being a sellout, that wasn't fair. I was angry because I missed the old you, but I didn't consider that maybe you were struggling too." She took a shaky breath. I'm in college, and I've been feeling pressure to have my whole life figured out. Your old videos made me feel okay about being uncertain. When your content changed, I felt like I'd lost a friend who understood me. You didn't lose me, I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. I lost myself, but conversations like this is helping me find my way back. The stories kept coming. A single mom who'd found strength in my vulnerability. A recent graduate who'd felt less alone in his uncertainty because of my content. A teenager who'd come out to his parents after watching my video about authenticity and self-acceptance. Each story was a reminder of the real impact I'd had when I was being genuine, and the responsibility that came with that influence. These weren't just numbers on a screen. They were real people whose lives had been touched by my willingness to be human in public. Marcus appeared at the edge of the crowd near the end, giving me a knowing nod before disappearing back into the convention chaos. I never got his contact information, never learned his last name, but his impact on this moment, on my life, was immeasurable. As the impromptu session wound down, people weren't asking for selfies or autographs. They were hugging me, thanking me for being real, promising to stick with me as I figured out how to be authentic again. The videos people posted from that session went viral, but not in the calculated way my recent content had. These were raw, emotional clips of genuine human connection, and they resonated in a way that no amount of strategic planning could achieve. For the first time in months, I felt like I'd actually influenced someone in a positive way. Not by pretending to have answers, but by admitting I was still searching for them too. That was 3 months ago, and I'm sitting here in my studio right now, but it looks completely different than it did before VidCon. Gone are the perfect ring lights and branded backdrops. I'm back to natural lighting and a simple setup, because I realized that all that polished production was just another wall between me and the people I was trying to reach. The changes started immediately when I got home from Anaheim. I called an emergency meeting with my team and told them we were scrapping the entire content calendar. Sarah thought I'd lost my mind, and honestly, maybe I had. But sometimes losing your mind is the only way to find your soul. I started a series called Unscripted Tuesdays, where I just talk about whatever's on my mind. No editing, no perfect lighting, no scripted talking points. Just me, a camera, and whatever thoughts are keeping me up at night. It's become my most popular content, and the comments section has transformed into this incredible space where people share their own struggles and support each other. The first unscripted video I posted was about that day at VidCon. I told the whole story, including the part about crying in a hallway and feeling like I'd lost myself. Within hours, the comments were flooded with people sharing their own moments of feeling disconnected from things they once loved. Teachers who'd lost their passion for education, artists who'd stopped creating for joy, entrepreneurs who'd forgotten why they started their businesses. But here's what really changed everything. I started saying no to brand deals that didn't align with my values, to collaboration opportunities that felt forced, to content ideas that were trending but didn't feel authentic to me. My manager warned me that turning down opportunities would hurt my growth, but the opposite happened. My engagement went through the roof because people could tell the difference between authentic Tyler and branded Tyler. I restructured my entire approach to sponsorships too. Now I only work with companies whose products I actually use and believe in, and I'm completely transparent about every partnership. I tell people exactly how much I'm being paid and why I chose to work with that brand. Some opportunities I've walked away from because they didn't pass what I call the Marcus test. Would this feel genuine to the teacher who reminded me what authenticity looks like? The loneliness that had been eating me alive for months started to fade. Not because my life became perfect, but because I stopped pretending it was. When I shared my struggles with anxiety, people shared theirs. When I talked about the pressure of social media, others opened up about their own relationship with technology. When I admitted I still don't have my life figured out at 25, thousands of people said they felt the same way. My subscriber count actually grew faster after I started being real again. But more importantly, the quality of my community transformed completely. The comments aren't just engagement anymore. They're conversations. People share resources, support each other through tough times, and celebrate wins together. It's become the kind of community I always dreamed of building, but didn't know how to create when I was focused on metrics instead of humans. I still think about Marcus almost every day. I've tried to find him through VidCon volunteer lists and social media, but I never got his last name. Part of me wonders if he was exactly who I needed to meet at exactly the right moment, like some kind of guardian angel in a volunteer t-shirt. Wherever he is, I hope he knows that 20 minutes of genuine human connection changed not just my career, but my entire relationship with what it means to influence others. The brand deals are different now, but they're better. Companies reach out because they want to work with someone authentic, not just someone with high engagement rates. I make less money per partnership, but I sleep better at night knowing I'm not selling my soul for a paycheck. Most importantly, I remember why I started this journey. It wasn't to become famous or wealthy or influential in the traditional sense. It was to share stories that helped people feel less alone in their struggles. To create a space where being imperfect was not just acceptable, but celebrated. To build genuine connections in an increasingly disconnected world. Marcus, if you're watching this, thank you. Thank you for seeing me as a person when I'd forgotten how to see myself that way. You reminded me that influence isn't about numbers, it's about impact. Real, human impact that happens one conversation at a time. So here's my call to action for you today, and it's different from what you might expect. Don't just subscribe to this channel or hit the like button, though I'd love if you did both. More importantly, be authentically yourself in whatever you're doing. Share your real story, not just the highlight reel. Find someone in your life who might need to hear that it's okay to struggle, that it's okay to not have all the answers, that it's okay to be human. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Comment below and tell me about your own Marcus moment, a time when someone saw the real you and reminded you of who you were meant to be. And yes, subscribe if you want to be part of a community where authenticity matters more than perfection. The numbers matter less now, but the connections matter infinitely more. And that trade has been worth everything.